A knock in the rain. KeanuReeves sat alone in his small but warm living room. A gentle fire crackling in the old fireplace. The rain outside was heavy, beating against the windows like tiny fists. It was one of those nights when the world felt too big and too cold, and Keanu, despite all the love his movies brought to people, felt an emptiness that fame could never fill. He sipped a mug of tea, his thoughts drifting back to memories of his own lonely childhood. Sometimes he wondered if all the money and the lights meant anything when the heart still ached at night. He almost didn't hear it at first, a faint knocking at the door, lost in the thunder's roar. It came again, 3 soft knocks, so weak they might have been the wind. But his instincts were sharp. He put down his mug and stood up, listening closely. There it was again, tap, tap, tap. He wrapped his cardigan tighter around his shoulders and walked slowly to the door, his mind racing with thoughts. Who could be out there in this storm? When he opened the door, a gust of cold wind rushed inside, carrying with it a shivering figure. Keanu's eyes widened when he saw a young boy, drenched to the bone, clothes sticking to his thin frame like wet paper. The boy looked no older than 10. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else in them, something that made Keanu's chest tighten. It was the look of someone who had lost everything but still clung to hope. "Hey there, kid," Keanu said softly, kneeling down so he wouldn't look so big and scary. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" The boy couldn't speak at first. His lips trembled as he looked down at his muddy sneakers. His small hands were tucked into the sleeves of a torn hoodie that was far too big for him. When he finally found his voice, it came out in a whisper, raw and broken. "I don't have one," the boy said. "They're gone." Keanu felt something sharp twist inside him. He knew that kind of pain. He had lived it too many times. He reached out, but the boy flinched away like a wounded animal. Keanu pulled his hand back, giving him space. "It's okay, buddy," he said gently. "You don't have to be scared. Do you want to come inside? You're freezing." The boy hesitated. His eyes darted past Keanu into the warm glow of the living room. The smell of the burning wood must have reminded him of a place he once called home. After a moment, the boy nodded. Keanu stepped aside, letting him inside. The boy stood awkwardly on the rug, water dripping onto the floor. Keanu quickly grabbed a blanket from the couch and draped it around his shoulders. The boy's teeth chattered, but he didn't say a word. He just stared at the fire, mesmerized by the flickering flames. "My name's Keanu," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "What's your name, kiddo?" The boy hugged the blanket tighter. "My name's Eli." "Eli, huh? That's a strong name. You hungry, Eli?" Eli nodded, but shame crossed his face. Keanu pretended not to notice. He walked into the kitchen, rummaged through the fridge, and made a warm bowl of soup. When he brought it back, Eli was sitting on the edge of the couch, his eyes darting around the room as if waiting for someone to tell him to leave. "Here you go, champ," Keanu said, handing him the bowl and a spoon. "Take your time." Eli's small hands trembled as he held the bowl. He blew on the soup, then took a careful sip. The warmth seemed to bring him back to life. His shoulders relaxed a little, and his eyes finally met Keanu's. There was gratitude in them, but also a question of fear that this kindness might vanish as quickly as it appeared. Keanu sat across from him, giving him space, but not leaving him alone. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with its soft, comforting song. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside that little room, a fragile sense of safety was growing. Keanu watched Eli, remembering the nights he spent alone in bus stations and on friends' couches, wishing for just one kind word, one open door. "Eli," he said after a while, his voice softer than the rain, "do you have anywhere to go tonight?" Eli shook his head, a tear slipping down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "It's okay," Keanu said, leaning forward. "You can stay here tonight. You're safe, I promise." Ellie's eyes widened again, but this time they shone with something Keanu hadn't seen before, trust. It was small and fragile, but it was there. He nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. Keanu smiled, though his heart ached. He knew this was just the beginning. Letting a homeless child into his home was not a simple act of kindness, it was a promise. one that would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. As the night grew darker, Eli fell asleep on the couch, his tiny frame curled up like a kitten. Keanu sat in the armchair nearby, watching over him. The fire burned low, casting long shadows on the walls. Somewhere deep in his mind, Keanu felt the weight of what he had done. This boy had no one else. And now, maybe, neither did he. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean. Inside, two souls, both broken in different ways, had found each other. It was a beginning neither of them had planned. But sometimes, the door you open for someone else becomes the door that saves you too. The first morning when dawn broke, the rain had stopped, leaving the world damp and quiet. Keanu hadn't slept at all. He stayed in his old armchair, watching the rise and fall of Ellie's chest as the boy slept. Every so often, Eli would shiver or mumble something in his sleep. Keanu felt helpless in those moments. He wished he could reach into the boy's dreams and pull out all the darkness, all the cold nights and empty bellies. As the sun rose, its pale light crept across the living room floor, touching Ellie's small feet that peeked out from under the blanket. Keanu stood up slowly, his back aching, and walked into the kitchen to make breakfast. He moved carefully, not wanting to wake Eli just yet. He scrambled eggs and made toast, the simple smells filling the little house with warmth. When Keanu turned back toward the couch, he found Eli awake, sitting up, eyes wide with fear and confusion, like he didn't remember where he was. Keanu raised his hand in a gentle wave. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. You're safe, remember?" Eli rubbed his eyes, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. He looked so small, sitting there in the big world. He nodded but said nothing. Keanu walked over and set the plate down on the coffee table. "Breakfast, you don't have to. Eat it all if you don't want to." Eli picked up a slice of toast and took a small bite. His eyes never left Keanu, as if he was waiting for the kindness to turn into anger. But Keanu just sat on the floor across from him, his legs crossed, sipping his coffee. Keanu said gently, "How long have you been on your own?" Eli chewed slowly. It looked like he was thinking hard about how much to share. Finally, he whispered, "A long time, since Mama got sick." Keanu's heart twisted. He set his mug down and leaned closer. "Did you stay in a shelter?" Eli shook his head. "Too many people, too loud, they take your stuff." Keanu nodded, understanding more than he wanted to admit. "Where did you sleep?" "Sometimes I stayed at the park, sometimes under the bridge. One night it rained too much. I didn't know where else to go." Keanu felt a lump in his throat. He reached out his hand but left it hovering between them. "I'm glad you knocked on my door, Eli." Eli looked at the hand for a long moment, then did something that broke Keanu's heart all over again. He reached out and took it. His small, cold fingers curled around Keanu's warm ones. It was just a touch, but it felt like a promise. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Keanu gave Eli fresh clothes, an old t-shirt and sweatpants that were too big, but dry and clean. He helped him wash up in the bathroom, trying not to make him feel ashamed. When Eli stepped out, he looked almost like any other kid. Almost. Keanu wanted to know more about him, but he didn't push. He knew trust didn't grow overnight. Instead, he asked simple questions. What did Eli like to eat? What was his favorite thing to do? Did he like dogs? Eli answered in short, careful words, but every answer was like a tiny door opening. By afternoon, Keanu realized he couldn't just let this go. He needed to understand what came next. He couldn't just keep Eli here forever without asking questions. But the thought of sending him back to the streets made his stomach twist. He picked up his phone and called someone he trusted, an old friend who worked with a charity that helped kids like Eli. He stepped onto the porch so Eli wouldn't hear. "Hey, it's me," Keanu said when his friend answered. "Listen, I need some advice. I've got a kid here. He knocked on my door last night. He's homeless, maybe 10 years old." The voice on the other end asked question after question. Was Eli safe? Did he have any family? Did Keanu understand how complicated this could get? "I know," Keanu said, glancing back through the window at Eli, who was sitting on the rug playing with a mug and pretending it was a car. "But he's just a kid. I can't throw him back out there. His friend promised to send someone to talk to them, maybe find some paperwork, figure out if Eli was in any system at all. When Keanu hung up, he felt the weight of what he was doing pressed down on him. He had stepped into something bigger than himself. He knew people would question his choices. They might think he was foolish, too soft-hearted, but he didn't care. He saw himself and Eli scared, alone, desperate for a door to open. That night, after dinner, Eli asked the first question he'd asked all day. His small voice broke the silence between bites of spaghetti. "Will they take me away?" Keanu froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. He put it down and looked at Eli, whose eyes were brimming with tears he was trying so hard to hide. "Eli," Keanu said, his voice steady, but his chest burning, "I don't know what's going to happen yet, but I promise you this: you're not alone anymore. No matter what, I'm going to be here for you." "You believe me?" Eli didn't answer with words. Instead, he pushed his plate aside, crawled around the table, and wrapped his arms around Keanu's waist. He held on like he was afraid to let go. Keanu held him back, his eyes stinging. Outside, the world moved on like nothing had changed. But inside that small house, two people who needed each other had found something they didn't know they were looking for: a reason to stay, a reason to hope, and the fragile beginning of a bond that neither time nor trouble could easily break. Asteriska. Knocked from the past days that followed felt like borrowed time for Keanu and Eli. In the mornings, they would sit together at the kitchen table, eating toast and eggs while the sun poured through the old curtains. Keanu watched how Ellie's eyes softened each day, how the fear in his small shoulders slowly began to loosen its grip. Sometimes they would watch old movies together. Keanu didn't tell Eli that some of the movies were his. He didn't want to make Eli feel small. He just wanted him to laugh, to feel like any other kid. But even in the warmth of those quiet days, Keanu felt the storm brewing. His friend from the charity called often, asking questions. Did Eli remember his last name? Did he have any old school papers, any clue about family? But every question only seemed to tighten Ellie's chest each time he heard Keanu on the phone. Eli would retreat into himself, curling up on the couch, with the blanket pulled over his head. One evening, Keanu sat beside him, the phone resting silent on the table. "Eli," he said softly, "I know you're scared, but these people want to help you too." Eli looked up, his eyes big and full of worry. "What if they take me away?" Keanu's throat tightened. "I don't know what's going to happen yet, but I promise you, I'm not going to let you disappear. You trust me?" Eli didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he nodded. He reached out and gripped Keanu's hand. It was a tiny hand, but the trust in that small gesture felt bigger than anything Keanu had carried in years. But the world beyond the door didn't care about promises. It didn't care about warmth and soup and old movies. It cared about rules. So when the knock came one afternoon, Keanu felt the old ache in his chest return. It was a woman from Child Services. She wore a neat coat and carried a folder thick with papers. She stood on the porch, looking at Keanu with tired but kind eyes. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice calm, "can I come in?" Keanu glanced over his shoulder. Eli was sitting on the floor, building something out of old cardboard boxes Keanu had given him. When Eli saw the woman, he froze, his tiny shoulders tensing up like a frightened bird ready to fly. "Eli, it's okay," Keanu said, his heart pounding. He turned back to the woman and nodded. "Come in." They sat at the table. Eli refused to sit. Instead, he hid behind the couch, peeking out every few seconds. The woman opened her folder, flipping through page after page of things that didn't feel real: birth certificates, school records, medical files, all the things a child should have, but Eli didn't. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her words soft but heavy, "we've been looking for a missing boy matching Ellie's description. We haven't found any relatives yet, but he's not in any shelter records. Do you know how long he's been here?" "Since the storm," Keanu said, his voice quiet. "He knocked on my door. He was freezing. I couldn't turn him away." She nodded. "You did the right thing. But you know how this works, right? We can't just let him stay here without paperwork, without a guardian order." Keanu felt the walls close in around him. He glanced at Eli, who was watching with wide, terrified eyes. "What happens now?" Keanu asked. "We need to bring Eli in," she said. "Just for a while. The law says he has to be in a safe place while we search for any living family. It doesn't mean you can't see him." But Eli couldn't hold it in anymore. He stepped out from behind the couch, his little voice sharp and desperate. "No, I don't want to go. Please don't make me go. Please, Keanu, please don't. Let them take me." Keanu stood up, his chest burning. He knelt down and held Ellie's trembling shoulders. Hey, listen to me. No one's going to hurt you. No one's going to make you disappear. I promise you, Eli, you're not alone." The woman watched them, her eyes softening. "We're not here to take him away forever, Mr. Reeves. It's the law. But there are other ways. You can apply to be a foster guardian. You have the means. You just need to do it the right way." Keanu looked at her, then back at Eli. He saw the fear, the helpless trust, and he felt the old ache in his heart flare into something fierce. He had lost too many people he loved. He couldn't lose Eli too. "I'll do it," he said, his voice strong for the first time that day. "Tell me what I need to do." The woman closed her folder. "We'll help you. But tonight, Eli has to come with me." Eli clung to Keanu's arm, sobbing into his shirt. Keanu held him tight, whispering in his ear, "Listen, Eli, you remember what I told you? You are not alone. This is not forever. I promise you, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to bring you home. You believe me?" Eli nodded, though his tears didn't stop. When the woman gently took his hand, Eli didn't scream or run. He just looked at Keanu, his eyes asking one final question: "Will you really come for me?" And Keanu answered without speaking. He pressed his palm to the glass as the car pulled away, the rain starting to fall again. He stood there long after. The tail lights disappeared, the promise ringing in his mind like a vow. He didn't know how hard the fight would get. He didn't know how much it would cost him. But he knew one thing: he would not break that promise. Not now, not ever. The fight begins. KeanuReeves stood in the kitchen, staring at the cold cup of coffee he had poured for himself hours ago. The house fell to quiet. Ellie's blanket lay folded on the couch, but it looked empty, like a story that had ended too soon. He reached out and touched the blanket, his fingers pressing into the soft fabric as if it could somehow bring the boy back. The night after Eli was taken, Keanu barely slept. He paced from room to room, replaying every moment, Ellie's tiny voice begging not to go, the fear in his eyes, the desperate way he had clung to his arm. Keanu knew that feeling too well. The world had taken too many people from him already. He wasn't about to let it take Eli without a fight. The next morning, he sat at the dining table with his old friend from the charity. They spread out piles of papers, legal forms, foster care applications, background checks. Every page was a reminder that kindness alone was not enough. The system had rules, walls built high to protect children, but sometimes they trapped them. "So it's not going to be easy," his friend said, flipping through the stack. "They're going to ask a lot of questions. They'll want to know if you're stable enough, if your job keeps you too busy. They'll dig through your whole life." Keanu nodded. "They can look at anything they want, as long as they see that Eli belongs here." His friend looked at him, eyes full of both doubt and hope. "You know this might not work, right? If they find any living relative, they'll try to place him with family first." Keanu took a deep breath. "Then I'll be here, even if they send him away. I'll be the one waiting for him when he comes back. He has to know that." The days turned into weeks. Keanu filled out form after form, sat through long phone calls with caseworkers, and met with lawyers who asked him if he really knew what he was getting into. They warned him if he made one wrong step, they could claim he was too attached, too emotional, not thinking clearly. But every time he thought about giving up, he pictured Ellie's tiny hand wrapped around his eyes begging him not to disappear. One afternoon, Keanu visited the center where Eli was staying. It was a clean building with bright hallways and colorful posters on the walls. But to Keanu, it felt like a cage. He sat on a hard bench in the visiting room, his heart pounding so loud he could barely hear the caseworker explaining the rules. When Eli walked in, he looked smaller than ever. His hair was messy, his eyes red from crying. When he saw Keanu, he didn't run. He walked slowly, as if afraid it was just a dream. Keanu opened his arms and Eli pressed himself against his chest, burying his face there like he was trying to hide from the whole world. "Hey, champ," Keanu whispered, his voice thick. "I missed you." Eli didn't answer, but his tiny hands gripped the back of Keanu's shirt so tight it hurt. They sat like that for a long time. When Eli finally spoke, his words were like tiny stones dropping into a deep well. "Why can't I come home?" Keanu pulled back just enough to look at him. "I'm trying, buddy. I promise you. I'm trying as hard as I can. But there are rules. People are trying to help, but sometimes they don't see what's right in front of them." Ellie's eyes shone with tears. "What if they don't let me?" Keanu pressed his forehead to Ellie's. "Then I'll be waiting right here every day until they do." Their visits became the only thing that kept them both going. Keanu would bring him little books and snacks. They would talk about everything and nothing: movies, dogs, what they'd do when Eli finally came home. But every goodbye was harder than the last. Eli would cling to him, begging him not to leave, and Keanu would have to stand there and watch. The caseworkers lead him away like he was just another lost child in a world full of lost children. One night, after another visit that left him hollow, Keanu sat on his porch staring at the stars. He thought about his mother, about the nights he spent alone after losing her. He thought about how easy it would be to give up, to accept what the world said he couldn't do. But then he thought of Ellie's eyes, those eyes that still held hope, even when everything else was falling apart. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "There has to be something else," he said, his voice low but fierce. "I don't care what it costs. Find me another way." The next day, he stood in front of the mirror, tying his old black tie. It felt strange after all these years, but he needed to look strong. For Eli, for himself. He walked into the courtroom, his heart pounding, knowing that every word he spoke, every truth he shared, would decide whether Eli came home or stayed lost in a system that didn't see him the way Keanu did. When he took the stand, he looked the judge in the eye and spoke the truth about a boy who had no one, about a man who once felt the same way, about a promise made on a rainy night when hope knocked on his door. And when he finished, he sat down, his hands trembling under the table. He knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he wouldn't stop, no matter how many doors slammed in his face. He would keep opening them for Eli. Because sometimes the family you find is stronger than the one you're born into. And sometimes all it takes to save someone is the courage to stand beside them when the rest of the world walks away. The hardest truth there inside the courtroom felt heavy, like a storm was waiting to break. Keanu Reeves sat at the long wooden table, his lawyer whispering words that sounded like thunder in his ears. Outside, the world went on like it always did: cars passing by, people laughing over coffee, lives moving forward. But inside, Keanu's whole world felt frozen in place, balanced on the edge of a single decision. Across the room, Eli sat with a caseworker. He looked even smaller in the big wooden chair, his legs swinging nervously, his small hands picking at the hem of his sweater. When he caught Keanu's eye, he gave the tiniest nod, like he was trying to be brave even though he was so scared. The judge called everyone to order. She was a kind-looking woman, but her eyes were sharp. She read through stacks of papers, reports from the center, notes from teachers who had met Eli, statements from the charity. Every word felt like a brick on Keanu's chest. Then came the part he feared most. The judge looked at him. "Mr. Reeves, you understand this isn't just about your heart. It's about the boy's future. Can you really promise to give him a stable home, despite your work, despite the press, despite how complicated this could get?" Keanu took a deep breath. His voice didn't shake when he spoke, but inside, he felt like he was standing on broken glass. "Your Honor, I know what you're afraid of. I know what everyone thinks when they see an actor taking in a homeless child. But this isn't for a story. It isn't for the press. It's because when that boy knocked on my door, he didn't just find me, I found him too. I found the part of me I thought I'd lost, the part that knows family is something you choose, not just something you're born into." The room went quiet. Ellie's small eyes shone with hope that looked too big for such a small heart to carry alone. Then the Judge cleared her throat. "There's another matter," she said. "A relative has come forward." Keanu's stomach dropped. He felt the air leave his lungs. He turned to look at Eli, who seemed frozen, his mouth half open like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "Who?" Keanu asked, though the word felt like poison on his tongue. The door at the back of the courtroom opened, and a man stepped in. He was thin, with tired eyes and a crumpled jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. When Eli saw him, he shrank into his chair, his shoulders folding inward like he wanted to disappear. The judge looked at the man. "Mr. Carter, you claim to be Ellie's uncle." The man nodded. "Yeah, I didn't know where he was. His mama, my sister, she never told me she was sick. When I heard he was found, I came." Keanu watched Eli. The boy's eyes were wide, his face pale. He wasn't running to the man. He wasn't even smiling. Instead, he looked at Keanu, silently begging him to do something. But what could he do? The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, do you have a place to live, a job, any way to prove you can take care of this child?" The man shifted from foot to foot. "I've been working construction. It ain't much, but I got a room." "His family, ain't that enough?" Keanu's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, with respect, the boy has built trust with Mr. Reeves. There are concerns about the uncle's history, arrests for petty theft, past drug use, unstable housing. This boy has been through enough. He deserves stability." The judge raised her hand to silence everyone. "We'll take a short recess. I want to speak with Eli alone." Ellie's eyes widened with fear. Keanu bent down beside him. "It's okay, champ," he whispered. "Just tell the truth. I'm right here." Inside the judge's chambers, Eli sat in a big leather chair. The judge knelt in front of him so she wouldn't look so tall. "Eli," she said softly, "do you know who that man is?" Eli nodded. "My uncle." "Do you want to live with him?" Ellie's lip trembled. He stared down at his hands. "He used to come over when Mama was sick. He said he'd help, but he didn't. Did he ever hurt you?" Eli swallowed hard. "He took my mama's money. He said he'd buy her medicine, but he didn't. Mama cried a lot." The judge's eyes softened. "And Keanu, do you feel safe with him?" Eli didn't hesitate. "He's my family now. He made me soup. He stayed up when I had nightmares. He said I'm not alone anymore." When Eli came back out, his face was red but his eyes were clear. He walked straight to Keanu and hugged him tight around the waist. Keanu put his hand on the boy's head, his own eyes burning with a mix of anger, hope, and fear. The judge returned to her bench, her face unreadable. "This is not an easy decision," she said. "The law favors family placement. But family is not just blood. It's love, it's safety, it's trust." She paused, looking first at the uncle, then at Keanu, then at Eli, who wouldn't let go of Keanu's hand. "I will review all this information," she said. "But tonight, Eli stays where he feels safe. Tonight, he goes home with Mr. Reeves, under protective foster care, until a final decision is made." Keanu's knees nearly gave out. He looked down at Eli, whose eyes were filled with tears, but also a tiny, shaky smile. The uncle shouted something about it being unfair, but the judge silenced him. The caseworker leaned down and whispered to Eli that it was time to go. But this time, it wasn't a goodbye. This time, Keanu lifted Eli up and carried him out of the courtroom, the boy's small arms wrapped around his neck like they were made to fit there. In the hallway, Keanu bent down and whispered, "We're not done fighting yet, buddy, but you're coming home." And for the first time since that rainy night, Ellie's soft voice answered back with something Keanu would hold onto forever. Home. The promise kept. KeanuReeves unlocked his front door with Eli perched on his hip, the boy's small arms clinging to his shoulders. The house smelled like warm bread and fresh rain. It was the same door Eli had knocked on that first stormy night. Only now, as they stepped inside together, it felt different. It felt like it belonged to both of them. Keanu set Eli down on the couch and wrapped him in his old blanket. Ellie's eyes roamed the room like he was making sure it hadn't changed. While he was gone, the fireplace glowed softly, the couch still dented from all the nights they sat side by side. Outside, the city hummed, but inside, there was only quiet relief. "You did it," Eli whispered, his voice so small that Keanu had to lean closer to hear it. Keanu brushed Ellie's messy hair from his forehead. No. Champer, we did it. You were so brave. But deep down, Keanu knew the fight wasn't finished. The judge had given them a chance: protective foster care, papers to sign, interviews to pass, home checks to clear. Any mistake, any doubt, and Eli could be taken again. The thought of that door closing on Ellie's small face made Keanu's chest ache with fear. In the days that followed, they fell into a rhythm that felt like stitching to broken pieces back together. In the mornings, Eli helped Keanu make pancakes. They would eat together at the little kitchen table, talking about silly things: favorite superheroes, what kind of dog they'd get one day, how they'd build a treehouse in the backyard that didn't even exist yet. But at night, the fear still came. Eli would wake up crying, nightmares pulling him back to dark bridges and cold park benches. Every time, Keanu was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, telling him softly, "You're safe. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." One evening, after Eli fell asleep, Keanu sat outside on the porch steps. His lawyer called him with news. The uncle hadn't given up yet. He was demanding another hearing, saying he had a right to take Eli. Keanu's hands tightened into fists. He knew the man wasn't there out of love. He was there for the money, the small benefit the state would give him to take care of Eli. But Eli didn't know that. Eli only knew fear. Keanu spent the next few weeks gathering every piece of evidence he could. Letters from neighbors who had seen him with Eli, photos of them reading books together, statements from the charity that vouched for how Ellie's spirit had come back to life in his home. Each paper felt like a shield, each word a promise he would keep. The final hearing was set on a cold morning. Keanu stood in the same courtroom, Eli holding his hand so tight it hurt. The uncle sat across the room, his eyes dark with anger. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Keanu felt every second stretch out like an endless road. The uncle spoke first, trying to sound like family, like he cared. But his words were thin. They didn't match the way Eli flinched when he looked at him. Then Keanu's lawyer stood, reading every letter, showing every picture. But none of it mattered as much as what happened next. The judge asked Eli to speak. The whole room seemed to lean forward as Eli stepped up, so small behind the big wooden stand. His voice shook at first, but then it grew stronger. "When Mama died, I didn't have anyone," Eli said, his eyes locked on the judge. "I was cold and hungry. I slept outside. People yelled at me to go away. But one night I knocked on a door. I didn't know who lived there. I just hoped they'd let me stay." He turned and looked at Keanu, his eyes big and wet but brave. "He didn't just let me stay. He made me soup. He let me watch his movies. He stayed up when I had bad dreams. He told me I'm not alone anymore. He's my family now." There was silence so deep you could hear the walls breathe. The judge's eyes softened. She looked at the uncle, then at Keanu, then at Eli. "Family isn't always blood," she said, her voice steady but kind. "Family is who stays, who fights, who loves you when the world walks away." She closed the file and gave a small nod. That made Keanu's knees nearly buckle. Eli stays with Mr. Reeves, permanently. Eli ran across the room and leapt into Keanu's arms. Keanu buried his face in the boy's shoulder, holding him so tight that for a moment it felt like the world couldn't touch them. They walked out of the courthouse into the cold morning sun. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They knew the fight was over. The door would never close on Eli again. Months later, their small house was full of laughter. The nightmares came less and less. Sometimes they made pancakes for dinner, just because they could. Sometimes they fell asleep on the couch watching old movies. Eli curled up under Keanu's arm. One evening, as the fire crackled, Eli looked up from his comic book and said, "I want to build that treehouse with you someday." Keanu smiled, brushing his hand through Ellie's hair. "We will, buddy. We'll build it together." And he knew then that sometimes the smallest knock can open the biggest door. That sometimes, when you save someone else, you save yourself. In the quiet warmth of that little house, a promise was kept. And for the first time in a long time, they both knew they were truly home.